Dr. Chelsea is one of the most important characters in Dr. Stone. She's only been in the story for about 30 chapters, but has already done a bunch to help the other characters. And she even ranked number 20 in the latest popularity poll, although she's still ranked lower than Joel, but that's a story for another time. Point being that on top of being so popular, Dr. Chelsea's skills as a geographer have completely changed the story. That's why in this discussion I'm gonna explain why Dr. Chelsea is one of the most valuable characters in Dr. Stone. Be warned that this video will contain spoilers. Before I get started, make sure to comment with your thoughts on Dr. Chelsea. I'll pick my favorite and share it as comment of the week in the next video. This week's comment goes to P. Blazevic for sharing their thoughts on the recent chapters of Dr. Stone. If you'd like more Dr. Stone and other manga discussions like this one, then make sure to subscribe and follow along with each week's video. So to get started, let's talk about Chelsea's skills as a geographer. Specifically, what separates her from someone like Senku or Ryusui. While there's plenty of smart folks in the Kingdom of Science, and plenty dumb ones for that matter, nobody really specialized in geography before Chelsea. At best, they might have had an above-average understanding of the world and what it looks like on a map, which I totally understand as an American. Geography isn't exactly our strong suit, so nothing but respect to anyone else who can remember all the different countries, rivers, oceans, all that jazz. I already mentioned them, but Senku and Ryusui would probably be the best bet in this area. Senku because he's wicked smart, and Ryusui because it's part of his job as a navigator. And this is only supported by the fact that they're always the ones who decide how to get to the next location. The obvious example being the trip to North America when they fought over how they would cross the Pacific Ocean, which of course gave us the epic poker battle and some of my favorite chapters in Dr. Stone. But this is pretty much the extent of their skills in geography. They both have a general idea of where things are located, but not to the extent that they could draw a sophisticated map of any given location. Ryusui's knowledge is mostly of the oceans and how to navigate them. Senku, on the other hand, has a general idea of where things are on land, but that's it. As we've seen a bunch of times in Ishigami Village, Senku usually needs to do some kind of exploring before he can find exactly what he needs. Even with a location like the Sagara oil fields, something he knew had to be out there but could only find after everyone worked together. But that's not the case at all with Chelsea. As Zeno explains, Dr. Chelsea has the entire world in her head, which for someone with a PhD is an awfully basic description of what she does. For anyone who isn't aware, geography is a massive field of study that even branches out into topics like economics and political science. Now, as you can probably imagine, Dr. Chelsea is more concerned with the natural science side of things. But she doesn't just have a really good memory of where everything is located. As a geographer, Chelsea has an expert understanding of the many natural phenomena around the world, as well as the effects humans have on those phenomena. For example, without actually going there herself, Chelsea was able to correctly explain how the massive loss of heat from petrified humans caused the increased snowfall in Japan. Senku and Zeno immediately understood what she was talking about when they shouted La Niña, which is the weather pattern of the same name in the Pacific Ocean, but it was only after Dr. Chelsea's explanation that it occurred to them. And while Dr. Chelsea serves a few different roles on the team, her value as a geographer basically boils down to one word: efficiency. Like I explained before with Senku, there used to be a lot of exploration that went into finding important resources. Senku using his jank sextant to find hot springs, Chrome using a metal detector to find iron, and don't forget, we almost didn't get cell phones because it was nearly impossible to find tungsten. Another friendly reminder that our girl Suika always comes in clutch. But with Chelsea around, the exploration game is completely different. Because she basically knows where everything is, the only thing the team needs to do is follow her directions. The best example of this is the difference in finding food. In Ishigami Village, it wasn't until Senku invented the hot air balloon that the villagers had a reliable food source. Beyond cooking fish 100 different ways and eating whatever fruits and vegetables they could find, the village was lucky if they managed to find any real game like bears or boars. And even with the hot air balloon, it wasn't until they explored the whole area that the team was able to draw a map of where certain animals and resources were located. Fast forward to Suika's revival in South America and things are completely different. As she decides to do some exploring, Suika realizes that Chelsea drew a map containing all the food and resources she could possibly need and where to find them. By simply following Chelsea's directions, Suika basically has everything she needs. In this sense, Chelsea is a lot like Senku. Because Senku wrote down clear instructions, the only real work Suika needed to do to make revival fluid was to follow those instructions. Likewise, because Chelsea left a detailed map, the only real work Suika needed to do to gather resources was to follow that map. It's basically the same situation as using the hot air balloon, just without any real exploring. In other words, just way more efficient. And it's not just the gathering of resources that became more efficient. Think about how much time the character saved traveling thanks to Chelsea. For example, when Senku asked her for the quickest route to the Medusa Pyramid, it only took Chelsea a few seconds to come up with a shortcut. If they didn't have Chelsea, Senku's team would have had to travel all around the coast just to get there. Traveling without Chelsea is basically like traveling without Google Maps. And I don't know about you, but I certainly would have no clue where I'm going if it wasn't for Google Maps. And that's the kind of value Chelsea brings to the Kingdom of Science. She cuts down on wasted time and makes life that much easier for the other characters. But there's another element to Dr. Chelsea that's even more important to consider. Like I just got done explaining, Chelsea's whole thing is efficiency. But that doesn't just mean efficiency for the other characters. It also means efficiency for the plot as a whole. Again, just think about how much time we spent in Ishigami Village in that whole area. It takes the Kingdom of Science 100 chapters to leave that place. As of right now, that's just about half the story. Now, obviously, a lot of that is because Senku was working on electricity, medicine, the Perseus. You know, kind of important stuff. Plus, we did have that little scuffle with Tsukasa and all his pillar men. But a lot of that time was also spent exploring for resources and raw materials. Imagine how much sooner Senku could have moved on to Treasure Island if he had had Chelsea. In fact, this is exactly the kind of thing we're seeing right now. At the moment, Senku's team is still trying to figure out the best way to map City, in India, which Inagaki and Boichi totally didn't lie about when they gave us that map back in 142. Now, Ryusui almost had everyone sit around for a whole year just so they would have to travel all around the Cape of Good Hope. But Chelsea points out that unlike the Panama Canal, the Suez Canal would be easier to use because of equal elevation on both sides. And it's also Chelsea who's able to scout out the dam blocking the canal. Granted, they still have to pay the troll toll or fight off whatever army of beavers just got rudely awakened, but if things work out, then Chelsea will have saved everyone a whole bunch of time. And while the time spent waiting and then traveling around Africa would probably only take up about a chapter or two, those chapters start to add up when you consider how much more traveling Senku's team still needs to do. So when you think about everything Chelsea brings to the table, she basically speeds up the pacing of the story. Now, one might argue that this isn't necessarily a good thing. Hell, I just got done explaining in my last video how Inagaki is kind of rushing the new cities. But realistically, Chelsea's contribution to the pacing is an entirely separate issue. Because Chelsea offering efficient ways to reach new destinations doesn't necessarily affect how much time Inagaki spends fleshing out new locations and background characters. You could still have Senku's team spend more time getting to know these background characters without wasting time getting to the next city. Point being that regardless of whether certain areas of the story might feel rushed, Chelsea's role as a geographer has immensely cut down wasted time in the story. Plus, faster pacing makes sense when you consider the speed at which the team is upgrading their technology. So, because of the way her skills have such a big impact on the story, Dr. Chelsea has quickly become one of the most valuable characters in Dr. Stone. And that's it for this discussion. If you enjoyed this discussion, then make sure to like the video. Also make sure to follow me on Twitch, where I discuss Dr. Stone and other Shonen Jump chapters every Sunday. And if you'd like more Dr. Stone and other manga discussions like this one, then make sure to subscribe and follow along with each week's video. Thank you for watching, and I hope to hear from you soon.